Hi, it's Vera. Welcome to episode 7 of season 2 of the PL Pod. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Kim Fahner, who lives and writes in Sudbury, thank goodness. She was the 4th Poet Laureate of Greater Sudbury from 2016 to 2018, and the first woman appointed to that role. Her latest book of poems is These Wings from Peddler Press. That was in 2019. And her next book of poems, Emptying the Ocean, will be published by Frontenac House Press in the fall of 2022. Kim is a member of the League of Canadian Poets, the Ontario representative of the Writers' Union of Canada, and a supporting member of the Playwrights Guild of Canada. In spring 2021, Kim won first place for her poem Beekeeping, a poem I loved, in the League of Canadian Poets National Broadsheet Contest. In the spring of 2022, Kim's play, All the Things I Draw, will be given a staged reading as part of the Sudbury Theatre Centre's Play Mind series. She can be reached at her website at www.kimfahner.com, and I recommend a visit to her website because it's a gold mine. Now, welcome, Kim. I think we should just dive right in, Kim, because we know each other. Yeah. So I've always wondered, at what age did you know you were a creative? I love the word creative. I was
laughing at your use of that word that way. I love that you used it that way. I think I've always loved stories and being told stories, and I had a great imagination as a child. It might have been an escape route in some places and times, but I just never felt like I fit in. I was a bit bullied when I was young through elementary and secondary school, and I think I saw the world differently, and maybe that's partly why I felt on the outside of things, So part of it's probably how I was locating myself, but I wouldn't have recognized that. And so, yeah, since I was little, I've been creative, but I used it to escape often. I would read, and then write stories that were kind of wild. And I think I remember writing little poems in grade 2 that were kind of dorky. And then my stories in grade 8, there was a teacher at Pius XII named Tony Armstrong, and he kept encouraging me to write these wild stories. So I started with more stories than poems in elementary school.
Well, I think Tony Armstrong has a few wild stories of his own. I love his poetry and his story about the amazing flashlight. That thing just killed me. I wish he was still available to me. I'd love to hear that story again. So like me, your environment when you were growing up had a big effect on your creativity, and that sounds reasonable. Do you remember what your first accolade as a writer was?
I was trying to remember this. I think it was in high school or in early university years. I think it might have been high school. It was the Poetry Institute of Canada, and they ran Young Writers Awards, and I submitted a poem, and it won an award and was published in a big fat anthology of high school poems from across Canada. And I still have that book in my basement library, and it's odd to see it. It was not the best poem.
Well, when you're young, you always think everything's excellent, and when you're old, sometimes you still do. Yeah. But not always, because you've realized life has beaten you down. I know you're a very humble person, and I wanted to ask you what you would most like people to know about you, at yourself, Kim Fahner, and as a poet.
Well, I think poetry, I have a friend's daughter who always says, you always say, that's a poem, that's a painting, everything's a poem to you. And I always say to her, it's true, it is, because I've not known anything different from that. So it's funny to me sometimes if I'm around people who aren't creative or aren't poets or writers, they'll find it strange that I see things that I see, and I'll notice it and make a comment out loud because I'm so excited to see something beautiful. So there's that, I think, and also just that I really give myself to the work. I feel I breathe poetry. I feel life is poetic. I feel even in its pain, it's poetic. And I've learned from those painful pieces, and that there's beauty on the other side of pain. So
Yeah.
struggle, I mean, it sounds sort of like idealistic, but for me in my life, it has been, I've had a very difficult life. It wouldn't look like that from the outside, I don't think. And I was thinking about that in terms of how you do as a poet. You know, I'm going to be 51 at the end of November, and I think that's a long road of publishing and really slogging and just accepting. You know, in the last 10 years, I'm quite comfortable with rejection now from literary presses, and I think there's something to be said for slogging through it and honing your craft, and you know, and reading other people's work and learning from other people's work. And I think to read widely from people who are dead and living and different genders and ethnicities and countries, and I, you know, this world is so wonderful and rich. But just to read a few, I've really broadened my reading of poetry in the last 5 years. I've been doing a lot more of poetry reviewing. So that I've done that on purpose because I want to learn how to be a better poet. And so the more poets I read, first of all, I get to meet these amazing poets you would know as laureate. We get to meet all these amazing people, and
Yeah.
they become friends and colleagues. And just to sort of learn, I mean, how vast and wonderful Canadian poetry is, the field right now. It's alive. And so I guess, does that, I don't even know if that
That
answers
answers
the
the question and adds to it too, because it's, and I would add to it too, that for someone like myself who writes haiku, it's not just a Canadian exploration of the writers, although there is a very rich organization here in Canada. I have branched out into the British journals, the Irish journals, Japanese journals. I think you have to just read them all and then know what you're, because you'll learn so much from those. They
Yes.
teach you how to write.
Yeah.
And, you know, you will, and I know that people often say, you know, I didn't want to read that because it might affect my own writing. Well, you have your own voice. And that
Yeah.
was going to be my next question. Your voice is so natural, Kim, and it's part of you. Every time you read, you just slide into that bit. And I wondered if this was something you developed over time, or is this just who you are and that's, you just put yourself at the front of the room and you are there?
Um, it's kind of you to say it's natural. I just think I read what the words come to me, I write them down, I craft them into poems, and then when I'm reading them, I just feel like they're part of who I am. So it's not, I don't, it's, I guess maybe then that's why you're using the word natural. I'm not somebody to put on airs or, um, to me, it's a gift, and I feel like almost a channel of something that I can't quite understand. You know, I'm still, I'll write something down and think, who wrote that? Because surely it can't be me, you know? Where did that come from? I think it's a bit of wonder and a bit of awe and respect for whatever the creative process is, too. Um, I don't know. I've seen some poets put on poet voices, I call them. I'm sure you've encountered them at open mics where it's this completely other sort of persona and voice. Not to say that you don't have a public persona and a private persona when you're laureate, especially that you need to guard your privacy. And I've always been mindful of that. And as an ambassador to your professional. So I'm mindful of that. But I've always been a private person. And I think that's important that you separate. I think you do that anyway. People do that in their lives. But
Well, yes, I think they do, because I think if you go around thinking that you can just let yourself be yourself in public and expect it not to have, like, maybe what I'm saying is that if you are too much yourself and not enough about your art, people
yes,
will either like or dislike it based on your personality. And that's really not it. But I know what you mean about poet voice, because how many hushed poets do we know?
And I
And
get it. I mean, there is a performance element to reading. You can have a great poet who, if they can't read or perform well, it will kill the poems. So it is important to have a presence, I think. And I'm
mhm,
aware of how best to enunciate and where to look and how to practice before a reading. And I think all of this is craft and thinking about why you're doing what you're doing as a poet, right? Um,
mhm.
but I had never thought about. It's really nice that you say I have a natural voice. That makes me pleased to hear from the outside, you know?
Well, having a poet read their own work in their own voice is a way of learning what maybe the poet meant by the poem, as opposed to reading it yourself. That doesn't mean there isn't value to both ways, because having read poems myself, I spend more time with it. I hear it in a different way. And your work, These Wings, I really loved it.
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
did. And I think that
You-
that was a moment that was more than a moment. I wanted to spend time with that book,
Oh my
and I
goodness.
really enjoyed it. And I know that my friend Irene Golis loved Narcoleptic Madonna
Yes.
and
Well,
had plenty to say on it.
that was a dark book, Narcoleptic Madonna, though.
Ah,
So
but so relatable to people. We all have darkness. We all need
yes.
to examine it and then, walk into the light a bit, So
Yeah.
it's great. I Since we've talked about your work, would you like to read a poem now?
Sure. I have these wings. I don't know if there's one you'd like me to. I brought it along, but
Any one of the Frida poems would be lovely. That is my favorite section of that book, was the Frida poems.
oh really? People
Yeah.
are so fond of Frida poems, and they I
Well,
just think she's fascinating as an icon. And there's somebody who created an image that was so different from her personality, you know. And then that's almost like so. I think it would be so much work to have to be someone you're not. And I'm always myself. I guess I'm comfortable enough with myself that I feel that would be so much work. That just sounds exhausting to me as somebody who's a quiet person.
yeah. Well, not just as a quiet person, as anyone who goes public. I mean, you always have to, it's like telling a lie. You always have to remember the lie. Well, being that other person is kind of a lie. And I'm not
Yeah.
that. Neither are you. So we are who we are.
That what you're saying is interesting too. I've met a couple of writers who meet me and they've been to readings and it feels like they seem to think they know me and I'm like, but I don't know you. It's this very, I think when you're laureate, weird things happen. You're in the grocery store and somebody starts talking to you and you're thinking, I don't know their name and they know me. And it's very odd because of that, right? Like that
Mm,
whole personal, private, public thing is weird to me still.
yeah.
And it happens. So I
Yeah.
hate to scare you, but it just so you know that's
Oh,
gonna
it
happen.
doesn't scare me. I wrote a column in Espanola for years, and everyone in Espanola thought they knew me a little bit. And they
Yeah.
kind of did. I wrote about my life, but I know exactly what you mean. Okay, let's have a.
I'm gonna read you one now that I'm talking about this difference between how she's portrayed as an icon, really how she's been portrayed. She was in such great pain from her injuries to her leg, you know, and she had an amputation, and that paralleled my mother's amputation. So I was drawn to it because of that. But so I've got this one that I'm just trying to find it. It's this one. It's called Her Locked Wardrobe. So after she died, Diego Rivera had they sort of locked down the house and all of her things and promised not to release any of the photos or letters or any of her clothing. And I thought about that. You know, she protected her own this image of herself for herself. So this is called Her Locked Wardrobe. Gather up these photos, stuff them into envelopes, pile them in cardboard shoeboxes, and put them away. The voices for safekeeping. What else is there? A crown of flowers, wilted now, a white peasant blouse, ruffled skirt, paintbrushes waiting in a tall glass jar. Prism yourself, made over and over, costumed images in peacock diversion. You could not find where you began and ended. So invented and imagined was your dress.
That is the best part of hearing you read.
Oh, that's really lovely.
Well, it was lovely. And again, your voice, it is very natural, and it sounds like everything you say is meant by you. And I appreciate that, because I write a lot of personal things myself. And I know that when I say them, I don't know how people are going to receive them, but I hope they will take it in the sense that, I've really thought this through, and here's what I think you should know.
Yeah.
So I think I get that from your poetry all the time. I feel like you're telling me something, and I better be smart enough to figure out what it is.
Oh
So
my gosh. Well, I mean, I guess everyone, I think, somebody said to me once, as soon as you write that book and it's published, you have no control over how someone reads a poem or interprets it. And I think the beauty of poetry and any kind of literature is that even theater and plays, you're going to take two people to a play and two people will see two different plays, right? And that's kind of wonderful and magical. And I wanted to thank you too. You did a review of these wings for the League of Canadian Poets, and I thought that was one of my first reviews for this last book, and it was so wonderful. And you read it so carefully, and a reviewer, being one myself, it's so lovely to be reviewed by someone who's read carefully and taken your work with great respect. And so I thank you for that too, as a friend and a colleague.
well, thank you, because the poem about, well, I won't go into the poem in case you're going to read it, but the one where you refer to sheets, that just blew me away. I
Which
just
one?
loved it.
Which one is?
No, I don't have my book of these wings handy. It's on the shelf over there, out of my reach. But the one about her lover leaving the bed,
Oh, okay.
and the sheets blushed. I think that was your phrase, and I just loved it.
Yeah. Then you wrote the little risque. Did you? Is it the rainstorm one? It might be the rainstorm one. I'm not sure, but I know which one you're talking about. Yeah. Oh God.
It was just excellent, and I loved it. I think we've all. Okay, maybe we won't go there.
Well, I think I don't know if it's this one. Is it the monarch one? Probably not. I don't know. I'm not sure which one you're talking. I think it might be. There's a couple with a man in there.
Well, this is one about oh, now this is going to drive us both crazy until we really do settle on it, but that's all right. There's plenty to talk about. We'll have to come back, because I don't think we're finished with these chats yet. There's plenty of podcasts left in my life. Let's move on to we should talk about how your work has evolved, because you are a very private person. And I think it's taken you a while to get to the place where you could actually say the sheets blush. So how would you say your work has evolved in itself as you've grown up and come beyond, a young poet and into a sort of a medium-aged poet, and learned your craft from beginning to now? And once again, lots of craft left to come.
Yeah, it has taken me a while to get to a place where I can write the sheets blushed and I can write a things, and not. There's a poem in there called Encounters with Pine that is basically sort of a lovemaking poem with a tree. That's what my friend and editor Monica Kidd said. She was like, "Read the tree lovemaking poem," and I'm always like, "What?" But how has it changed? I think it was very self-referential in the beginning in my 20s. I was writing about my life in Ottawa when I was there, and then I came home after my master's, and it was kind of much more, here's a person in my life, I'm going to write about them. And I think the next book, Braille on Water, was a bit more mature, but I was in my late 20s. Narcoleptic Madonna is really full of pain because it covers a bigger space of time when I dealt with depression and caring for my parents before they died. That was a huge period, and it's very, very dark. Um, Some Other Sky is really kind of like wonderful as a bridge between places, I think.
Mm.
And it's so much a love affair with Windsor, that book, and Marty Gervais, and Black Moss Pross were so amazing with me and the people in the literary groups there. But I think These Wings is a book in my late 40s, and I've come to love myself. It took me a
Mm.
long time to love myself, just
Yeah.
because my life has been complex. And I think the voice is stronger, is curious, exploratory, and fascinated by how I'm evolving as a poet. I'm interested in how I'm evolving now as a poet, and the next manuscript is different again. So my editor for Frontenac House is Micheline Mailer Kovitz, and she's calling it a water world. So she said, you've gone from birds to water, and it's very elemental, and doesn't I think it's fascinating. I'm really drawn to that whole idea of I think it's the Celtic stuff, and the Irish and Scottish in my background in the story, and
Mm.
sort of a witchy, magic-y thing going on there. I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers your question or not. I'm not
No, I
sure.
think it does, because I think, when we're young, we have one sort of ideal. And then as we grow, we realize the ideal can broaden and take in other aspects of life. And, I think you cheat yourself by thinking that all you are is that young poet. You
Yeah.
have to be able and prepared to take on the older you and talk honestly about what you know and what you've learned, I think. Because if you don't speak honestly of what you have, you're cheating everyone, yourself, your public, your readers don't get the true picture. I mean, it's that lie again, isn't it? You
Well,
know.
I'm fascinated by that. I think in These Wings, I'm noticing it's still in this new manuscript. It's in my plays and my novel as well. Is just this notion of superficial versus sort of a depth to things, and everything is so like Instagram filtered, and everything
Mm.
perfect, and overexposed people, and just like I can't handle it. I'd rather
Hmm.
post a picture of a beautiful tree. I
Well, yeah. And I can't tell you my life story in a tweet,
no.
not even a series of tweets. I am old enough that I need more space. And I think that's what poetry does for both of us. It gives us the space
Yeah.
to let people know who we are. And I think that's great.
You know
Let,
what else I was just thinking
mm,
when you were talking though too is this notion that I think with These Wings, I've come to past middle age now. I'm more comfortable with saying what I think and what I feel and believe. I'm more confident in who I am. And if people don't like it, I don't care. They can leave. Like
mm,
that's like skin sloughing off. So take me as I am or don't. That's
mm.
fine.
That's a
And the other
great
thing
moment to come to, though.
Oh my God. I actually think you couldn't pay me to be anything less than about 46. I wouldn't want to go back beyond 46. I feel like, um, I thought I knew who I was at 40, and I had no idea.
Hmm.
And I'll probably feel the same way now. I'm 50, turning 51. I might feel that way at 62. I just feel like in the last 5 years, I've blossomed in a weird way inside myself as a writer, as a human, as a woman. And I've just been thinking about this a lot lately, that you couldn't pay me to be 36 to 42. For some reason, that period to me was like that place where you're trying to prove that you're something. So you're almost trying too hard. And
Hmm.
I feel like now I'd like to swear, but I won't. But like, prove it. Like this is now I'm at a place where the craft is the most important thing to me, and
Hmm.
serving the words in a way, I guess, and
Yeah.
hopefully encouraging young writers. I'm very keen on encouraging younger writers. So
Actually, we could have stopped at encouraging writers, because I don't care what age you are. If you've never dove into it, you should. if you have something to say.
Yes.
And I think that's something I really appreciate. I've drawn on a lot of people who are not young. They're
Yeah.
not, you know,
Yeah.
they're not 1 foot in, but they are older. And I
Yeah.
think those people are speaking from a life of experience. And I love that. Well,
Well,
we need you to speak of a life
know,
of experience now with another poem, or we're going to lose track of everything here.
yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is, I guess
Okay.
because I teach high school, is I'm really mindful of the fact that I want to encourage young writers in high school, but even in the, young writers beyond that, just, or emerging writers, I should say. Maybe
Mm,
emerging writers is a better word, because I didn't have that when I was in high school. So I want to be able to say to somebody who's a quiet person in high school, especially, if you try to do this, maybe, and they find their voice that way, it's kind of really beautiful.
mm,
I didn't have that, and I really wished I had now. So,
yeah. And life isn't high school.
no, but I
They
think
should all
you
know
need
that. It's a
you need
training ground.
yeah, but if you're a little writer and you're a quiet little writer, I could have used somebody else who was a writer to see maybe that I had a spark of something, and I could have used a little, like, that's a really lovely poem. Like, you came to visit my class, and they lit up after you left,
Uh,
because
and I hope that one girl really, yeah, that one
you
who
know,
blew me away.
I know, but see, that's what I'm saying, is that they're uncertain, and then they write something, and you think, my God, you wrote this beautiful little poem, and they can't envision that that's them. And then it takes a writer who they think a writer, I'm putting quotation marks around that, somebody they see as being labeled that way, to
Mhm.
it encourages them. And I also think that's mentorship. I think part of being a writer is that you can hopefully share what you've learned. And I mean, 50, I hope to God, like, I'd like to be able to hope that I can mentor one or two people
Mm,
a bit. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. I'm trying to, you want another poem, but
I do.
I'll give you this one. This is a poem about desire. I'm really proud of this poem. I think it's beautiful. It's all metaphor, but basically it's desire for someone. It's called Winter Sky. Heart is a wooden puzzle, no clues. Body quivers, shakes, a lock without a key that fits. Touch me here. Stars will burn with silver and sapphire, outlined in filigree, constellations of breath taken in and released, spiraling into the night. I just think it's a beautiful poem on the page as well. So I'm proud of that one.
And it is a lovely poem. I I think, you know, without the opportunity to put your work out there, we would all just be speaking to each other. And
Yes.
that's my next question to you is, about small presses in Canada or beyond. For me, I go to other presses in other countries because that's where they are. But I would imagine you have a fondness and a respect for the need for literary presses in Canada and the
Uh,
small presses in particular.
um, absolutely so. I also have a deep, deep passion and commitment to indie bookstores. Uh,
Mm.
I I buy books from Glass Bookshop in Edmonton. I order and I pay extra shipping because I love these two young men who own that store. They opened it just before the pandemic,
Oh.
and went through a difficult time, and now they're coming back out the other side. So I don't buy from Amazon.
Mm.
um, I refuse. And I also buy books of poetry from my friend Kirby in Toronto, and she has a knife work book,
Mm.
the most beautiful poetry bookstore in Canada. It is the only one that I'm aware of that's all poetry. So that's to bookstores. But to literary presses, yes, absolutely so. I think, and that means you buy their books, So you buy Gasborough books, you buy Peddler books, you buy all of these tiny presses, and they're not tiny presses. I shouldn't call them that. These are presses that have been around forever. Like Peddler was around for a long time. Brick is, well known. These Woolsack and Wynne, all of these, Book Hug. I don't want to name them in case I forget some of them. Turnstone and Frontenac and Black Moss, and even Lawrence Stephen with your Scrivener Press. To me, Laurie did something here in Northern Ontario which needs to be reminded. People need to be reminded of what he did for us as Northern writers. I don't think people remember it enough, So yes, I'm a fan of small presses in Canada. And I'm a fan of literary journals across Canada. And I'm a fan of supporting other writers, when they have successes, of lifting one another up and creating community. And we are all people. And I think we love to talk to each other as poets. We can have the best conversations and go on for hours and hours because we love what we do. And we're not doing it for money, I don't think. If you're doing it for that or for awards, you're in it for the wrong reason.
Well, not only that, you'll probably starve to death. Yes. You will be that starving artist.
That's right. I think that the award culture is really complex and can be really detrimental. It can be amazingly positive too, and that's great. But I think we need to support one another, as creatives, as you use that phrase. It's a big family, right?
It is, yeah. Well, I think we've reached the end of this podcast, and it's been great talking to you. Would you like to close us out with a poem, and then I will just end by thanking my people?
I wish I could find the poem you were talking about.
Oh, me too.
It's gonna drive me mad, Vera.
We'll talk later.
I will read you. How about I read you? Oh, here, I found it. It's called The Nomadic Voluptuary.
There you go.
So I had a friend who was married but had an affair, and she was telling me about it, and I wrote this poem for her. And this idea of what is love and what is duty, and do you stay in something that's not suited to you? And so this is for her. She knows who she is. Somebody taught this out in BC and sent me a note and said, the students all think you're okay with this. And I said, I'm okay with people being happy inside themselves. So this is called The Nomadic Voluptuary for M. She moves between men, one husband, his damaged heart surgically repaired and mending, duty over love, vows over truth. The other, lover she escapes to, rushing across cobbled streets in Montreal, late in the deep blue of afternoon, or early, just after dawn splits the night. One gives her history, silverfish stretch marks finger painted by pregnancy. The other, time, endless cups of Russian tea, morning beds rumpled, duvet blushing. She is pleasure, searching the hours, tasting, touching, letting the rains wash over la nouvelle vie.
Well, I could cry right now. I just love that poem so much. I think it talks about us as women, really, how we are so more than one thing. We are more than one thing.
Well, it's funny because she, when I wrote that for her, I gave it that title, and she said, "You don't realize you're a nomadic voluptuary too, but you are."
I think we would all be happy to wear that title.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here we are at the end. So I will say, listeners, my thanks to Kim for coming in today. And I'm going to close off by saying what I always say. Until next time, write something. It feels good.